Hello everybody and welcome back. It's been a long time since I've done a video, and as you can see I finally have a nice camera. So I'm on stream. Hello. This video is going to be very simple. It's going to show a few things. We're very close to releasing Looking Glass Beta 2, and I've got to thank everyone that's been supporting this project thus far. There's been a lot of people financially been supporting it. We've also had quite a few in VFIO, Discord that have been helping with debug. A couple that have been good with testing and stuff that have helped to diagnose or narrow down issues. Beta 2 will be a very interesting release because the way that we're capturing in Windows has been focused more on using DXGI and improving performance there, because NVIDIA have deprecated the NVFBC or NVIDIA Frame Buffer Capture API. And that will be removed from the NVIDIA driver at some point in the future. So we need to really focus on DXGI support primarily now, especially since NVFBC didn't work anyway unless you had a Quadro video card or better due to NVIDIA's licensing. So yeah, DXGI it is. We discovered a little while ago it is documented but very poorly documented Windows API call that lets us boost our kernel thread priority for capture in the capture application. And to do this, the application requires a higher level of access than normal, and as such we've actually had to implement a service. So Looking Glass launches as a system user, which gives it the ability to capture UAC dialogues, the secure desktop and stuff in some instances. Still can't capture the logon screen, but it can capture things like the lock screen and the task manager and things normally protected by secure desktop like the UAC prompts. They now captured properly. The other nice thing is you no longer need to put the vsync limit on or a frame limiter on, because we now have priority in the kernel. Windows will give priority to our capture thread, and you can run the application or game unfettered in frame rate. The difference is quite substantial, and you'll find that as you play around with it if you haven't already. This video is going to go through the process of downloading and building the client for Beta 2 Release Candidate 4. These instructions will not change for Beta 2 when it's released in full, but there are a few things that I'd like to add into this video, such as how to build a debug version when there are issues so that people can give me sufficient information when there's a problem so I can help them, as well as how to use the debugger in order to provide what we call a stack trace. This is essentially the current state of the application at a point in time, either at a crash or at a predefined point we want to stop it at. That allows me to see the entire state of the application and sort of try to understand what's going wrong. I've provided this information in the VFIO Discord quite a few times now, but it seems to be coming up fairly frequently now with issues that don't crash the program out, because by default it will it'll output a stack trace for me anyway. But issues where the client doesn't crash, it won't give me a stack trace. So this video is primarily oriented on the client and not the host. So what we'll do is we'll get started. To build the client, you want to go to the download page on the Looking Glass website, which is looking-glass or looking-glass.hostfusion.com/downloads. At the moment, like I said, we're going to be working on Beta 2 Release Candidate 4. The delta between Beta 1 and Beta 2 RC4 is enormous. As such, I'm actually recommending at this point to use Release Candidate 4 over Beta 1. We're very close to Beta 2 being released. There are a few minor issues that we need to sort out. That's what this video hopes to target, is one of these issues that I need some information on so we can stop a failure to start issue. Anyway, what you're going to do is grab the source code from here, this little box icon. The reason is, if you get the version of GitHub, if you clone it, unless you are doing development or you know how to clone submodules and you're careful to clone them and update them in the future, it's far easier just to download this, because this archive I pre-prepare with the submodules included, as well as versioning information that helps me to know that you've pulled down the version off this website. So it's easy for me to know what version you're running when things crash, which is quite important. You obviously also have to make sure you get the corresponding host application. So you've got the Windows icon there. You click on that, you'll download the archive with the installer for the Windows service. Obviously, you do that inside Windows, and that'll be covered either on the forums. You can have a look on the wiki, or you can wait around, and at some point I'm going to create a video on that too. So I've already downloaded and prepared this. Now I'm not going to be running this version. I actually have the latest Git master build on my system, but the instructions are identical. So this doesn't change. So in a terminal I've pre-prepared over here, just expand this out a little bit. I'm already inside the Looking Glass source code directory. Now, when you download that tarball and extract it, you'll actually see the same content in here. Maybe change in the future if I add files to this or whatever, but it's essentially going to be the same. Inside this, you've got the client directory, and inside that is the client source code. What you're going to want to do is create a directory to build the program into. CMake's really nice in that it does what's called out-of-tree building, and we take advantage of that with Looking Glass. So we go make the build, and we'll cd into the build directory. So that's where we're at the moment, the empty directory. We now need to configure CMake to build the project. So if you have followed the instructions already and installed the required dependencies for your operating system, you can proceed straight away, but I'll quickly show you that as well. Should have done that first. If we go to the wiki, lookingglass.hostfusion.com/wiki, we'll give you the whole wiki, but there's the installation page. You have the build dependencies and the per platform required dependencies to install depending on what operating system you're running, what distribution you're running. I personally use Debian, and I do not verify any of these others. These are being user contributed by the community, and as such I can't verify that these lists are complete and accurate. If they're not, feel free to create an account and alter this page when you figure out what's different and submit the change. This is a editable wiki by the community. You just have to register an account to stop spamming. We had issues with that. So back on here, I obviously have done that already. I have all my required dependencies. So I'm going to run cmake ... That means run cmake for the source code in the directory above where we are right now. You could actually do this from any directory on the system and provide the full path to the source code, and it would work. So we'll do that. And you'll see that it's built the build files. It's ready to go, and it's created several files in this directory to do with building the application. Now it's not built yet. To build it, it's as simple as running make. But if you want to increase the speed at which this builds, you can do what's called a parallel build and specify J. And this is for how many processes to run at once. So if you've got, say, a system with 4 cores, the general rule of thumb is to double that. So if you had 4 cores, you'd say J8, like that. If you had 16, J32, it doesn't really matter. It's just the most efficient. It'll build quicker. It just speeds it up. You can just run make as it is anyway, but it would take longer. So we'll run make J8. So that's now compiled the client. Now, by default, this is a release build. The difference between release and debug is minor. The primary difference is the compiler optimizations are, I believe, they are turned down a level and debug symbols are included. This means that the application under debug runs a little bit slower. It could be possibly benchmarked slower. In practice, personally, I can't actually notice a difference. But there is a difference, just so that you're aware. It also adds debug symbols to the application, which when there's a crash or we need to jump into a debugger, I can see specifically where it crashed, where in the code it went wrong, where things are, and what the state of the application is. But we're going to proceed anyway right now with the build we just made, which is a release build. So to run Looking Glass, once you've built it, you'll see that it's actually created this file, Looking Glass client. This is the executable, and it's 365K. And I note that because the debug version is much larger because of the extra information it contains. To run that, we just go /Looking Glass client. Now there are run arguments for Looking Glass as well. There's a lot of things you can set up to happen automatically, such as window positioning and sizing. You can adjust the way the render is going to operate, as well as things like automatically capture the mouse input for situations where you want to launch it and be interactive with the system straight away for something that doesn't want the mouse to leave the window, like a first-person game or maybe a CAD application that pans when the mouse hits the edge of the screen and you don't want the mouse to exit the Looking Glass window. So if you run that with -H, you'll get a full list that's nicely formatted of all your options and their current value. So we can scroll back up this. Now, because I've enlarged my font size for video, obviously this is wrapping and it doesn't look great. But if you go through this in your own time, you'll see there's a lot of options here you can play with and adjust to whatever you want, really. So what we're going to do, we're going to just launch it with the default. I'll show that. There's also a config file you can create in your home directory, looking-glass-client.ini. If we look in that, it's literally an INI file format. Now, the details in mine you see here are rather different to what most people will be using, because I have a virtual machine to virtual machine setup. I'm not actually running the client on the host machine. I'm running it inside another virtual machine, and I'm talking between two virtual machines. So you might notice I've got a WID SHM file option, for example, and instead of Spice connecting to the local host, I'm connecting to the host machine over the local network, which is using VFO LAN, so I don't get latency issues. I'm also turning off vSync in EGL by default, but I actually think that's a default now. You don't need to set that anymore. OpenGL stuff here I've got set, but it's only for when I test. We're not actually using OpenGL, and I don't recommend anyone does unless they need to, because they're using an older video card that doesn't support OpenGL 4, I believe it is, with EGL extensions, which they've been around for quite some time. You shouldn't need to worry about that. You can also change your mouse sensitivity and stuff as well. Again, that's commented. The INI file supports comments with obviously the semicolon at the start of the line. So you could put in here comments. This is just for testing, for example. So it'll use those defaults, and when you run -H and get this output with the help, it'll actually show you what the configured value is now, not the defaults. Short also means the short option. So you could say, for example, to scale the cursor, you could say just -J, or you could say looking glass client, and that was Spice scale cursor equals yes. Or you could say 1, or you could say no or true. It understands the various forms of one, like on or off, basically. You can even say on or off. And then space for your next parameter. We're just going to run it with my pre-configured config. We'll run that, and there's our Windows session. Now what we're going to do is show you how to build this as a debug release. So if you're having problems and I need debugging information, or you want to jump the gun a little bit and help out by providing that information from the get-go, instead of coming and asking for help before it is really helpful if you can provide this information up front and when you're having a crash or a freeze of some kind. One common one is when you launch it, you just get the Looking Glass logo and nothing happens even though it says starting session. That's a great time where I could really use this debug information. So we're going to terminate that, and we're going to now build a debug version. So to do that, we need to reconfigure the project using CMake, and that's very simple. We just run CMake again, but this time we add the argument CMake build type equals debug ... All right, or the absolute path to your source code from where you are building at. Now that's reconfigured for building with debug symbols. Even if you actually notice we've got backtrace support here. On some platforms, this is a pain because the bin utils version in your distro may be out of date, or it may be updated beyond what we support, and you might have to turn off backtrace. Even if you have that turned off, this is still what I need. This is important information. It will still work, even without this inbuilt backtrace support. So we've now built, reconfigured. We'll run the make process, J8 to speed things up. Done. Now if we look at the file, you might notice we have increased now to 1.8 meg. And like I said before, that's because it contains all the debug information of the application. So line numbers, function names and stuff. Nothing about your system. It's only information about this program. So you're not going to leak information by doing this either. Now if we run the application, Looking Glass Client, it'll work just as before. It may, like I said before, have a slight performance decrease, but we don't need to worry about that. If we close that, we're going to actually run this under GDB, and you may not have that installed, so you'll need to check your distribution-specific instructions for installing it. Under Debian, it's apt-get install GDB. Ubuntu is likely the same, or aptitude, one of those. You might have to run it using sudo or login as root, either way. Obviously, because you're installing a new package on the system, but in short, you need GDB installed. So what we're going to do now is run it under GDB, just simple as GDB, and then the program. Now, a small caveat here is that when you run it under GDB like this, it won't accept arguments on the command line. This is a GDB thing because GDB is looking for arguments for itself, not for the target application. If you have arguments you need to specify to make it start, either specify them in the INI file, which is a bit easier, or once you run this and you're on the GDB prompt, you type set args equals, and then your arguments that you would normally type on the command line and press enter. And that will prepare it to run. When you restart GDB for whatever reason, you'll need to do this again. It's a bit of a pain. But like I said before, we're loading our settings from the INI, so I don't need to specify any arguments here. To start the program now, we just type R for run and press enter. And you'll see in the background, we saw a whole heap of information about new threads and things going on. Now let's pretend that this has crashed and it didn't start. For example, you're on the waiting for host screen or got the Looking Glass logo or something's happened, or even it's hung completely. If you come back across, I'll just pull this off the screen, to the debugger and press Control-C. It'll interrupt it. You'll see it's telling me there's more information because it's gone into paging so that we don't miss anything. You can just say continue, it doesn't really matter at this point. And you'll see there, it's received an interrupt and it's told us where we have interrupted the program, at what point and what it was doing when we stopped it. And you'll find that the application itself has hung if it was responsive at all. You'll find it won't respond, clicking on the window won't do anything, it's no longer drawing because we've literally paused the application. So what I need from you, if you are having an issue, is to now run the following command, is thread apply or BT. That tells it to run what's called a backtrace on all threads. Each thread may be in a different location and state, and the interaction between those threads can cause things to stall or hang. It also gives me information as to what state the program is in. So if we run that, you'll see we'll get a whole heap of information. You see it's gone into paging again. We can just say C to continue without paging. Unless you want to look through this, you can start hitting continue and just, hitting return and just looking at each page. We just want to output the whole lot. So that's done. Now, what I need from this is you to take your cursor and select everything up to where you typed in that thread apply or BT command, which the number of the thread varies depending on your system because your video card may be creating more threads in the drivers and stuff like that for the application, like the Mesa stuff may create more threads, all the way up to here. Copy that and paste bin that and paste it into either the Level 1 Tech forums asking for support or on the VFIO channel when you're asking for support. What I also would need as well is the full application log without this debug information leading up to the crash if you can provide it. If not, if it's only crashing really sporadically and it was hard to get this to happen, you can just go and copy all of this all the way up so I also see all of these messages from the application. Because these also help me to debug what's going on and what hardware's in your system and what combination of things are interacting that may be causing it to crash. All the way back up to where you launch GDB. What we're going to do is, we've paused the application by doing this. It actually is still functional. It's going to crash it'll terminate if I continue this because the host will have expired and unsubscribed our client due to it timing out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go queue for quit and say yes. And now it's terminated the program and we're back on the console. If we now run the Looking Glass client and connect to the host, go full screen on that, you'll see I've got it open here already. This is the host log. If you're having problems, this is another file I need in its entirety. Actually, correction, maybe not in its entirety. Best thing to do is, if you can, empty it first. Delete the contents of this, save it as an empty file, or even delete the file. Run the application so it's only got that one session in it because it keeps appending to this file. Each session is appended to this log. It actually has no limits on how long it can get, so you may want to check it every now and then in case it's getting too big until we fix that. But yeah, check this, and you can see in this version I actually have an issue with it restarting. I'm tracking down, but that's unrelated to this video. This file, though, is located in various locations. If you're running the Looking Glass before Release Candidate 4, host, if you're sorry, I'll reword that. If you're running the Looking Glass host before Looking Glass B2 RC4, it will not be running as a service. You'll be running it as a task, and the log file, or you're running it directly, and the log file's location will depending on how you run it. If you're running it as a task with elevated privileges, it'll be in the C drive Windows temp folder. If you're running it as your user, just by double clicking the executable and launching it, the log will be in C drive users your user temp. It's always in the temporary directory related to the user it's running as. If it's running as a service, it'll be in C drive Windows temp. Okay, if you actually are unsure where it is and it is running, it'll tell you if you right click on it and say log file location. Now, in previous versions, this used to open the log. The reason why we don't anymore is because when Looking Glass runs as a service with the system user privileges, opening this file without a whole heap of fiddling about opens the file with your editor with elevated privileges, which is quite dangerous. So we're not doing that. We're just showing where it is now. It's on you to find the file and open it. So you see there, C drive Windows temp Looking Glass. So this file is quite important to provide to when you're having issues. I think I've covered everything now I intended to cover in this video. Hopefully I'll be able to produce more content in the coming months coming up. I've got a lot going on at the moment. I've got a lot of work happening. I'm also working on a project, electronics project to enhance Logitech brake pedals for those that are using the Logitech steering wheels and stuff as simulators. I'm collaborating with a few, I'll try and say that right. I'm collaborating with a few on that. What we're doing is we're putting a load cell into the brake pedal as a kit, and this is like a bolt-on zero permanent modification, fully reversible modification that requires no soldering and no real technical expertise to install. So some of you might be interested in that. We intend to release this as a fairly affordable kit to apply to your steering wheel. Yeah, but that's where we're at the moment. Looking Glass is very close to Beta 2. Like I said, a few minor issues, and we should have that out the door as soon as I can. But thank you to everyone that's been supporting this. Thank you to the Patreons that are funding basically me to continue working on this. Every little bit counts. It isn't not complaining at all, but it's not a huge amount, but it does encourage me to continue working on this, considering the fact that the amount of time involved is quite substantial. Also, thank you to those that are continuing to promote this, such as Level 1, Wendell over there. He does a great job, as well as others that are generally trying to help support the community. Ones such as, hold on, I'll make sure I say this right. Where are we? Yeah, AIBER on Discord. He does a wonderful job of providing technical support and helping people in the Discord chat, and it truly is appreciated. There's a few others there too that get in and help, such as I think VM Fortress, I think his name is, that are helping to provide the debug and technical support as people come up with issues and so on. Yeah, if you can use this information and provide the debug information when you have issues, it would be a great help. Thank you.